The future job is managing a team of agents like you would manage a team of people. You must develop this skill, and you must do it now, because it is going to be the difference between who gets hired over the next 2 or 3 years and who doesn't. And if you cannot practice that skill at work, then you must practice it at home, because in my opinion, your career depends on it. And so get yourself a personal account and find cool things that you can do with your own personal email and your own personal calendar, and start a side hustle, start a newsletter there, or something that gets you using these tools.
Well, it's about time we get Paul Avery on the podcast. We've talked many times in the past, but this will be a fun one. So, Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here. And I don't know if it makes sense to record the things that we all talk about when we get together. That seems like quite high risk. I hope you did a risk assessment for it. But I am excited to do it nonetheless.
I also think that we've been trying to get you on for so long and it hasn't worked, that I'm not convinced this isn't an avatar just so you could shut us up.
Probably.
No, this is the real me.
Well, we normally ask everybody to give us a funny story that's happened in your career. However, you just said nothing as funny has ever happened to you. But so we'll ask you a different question, which is, give us a funny AI story that you've got.
Yeah. So for context, some funny things have happened to me. I just don't think I can share them on a public forum that other people are going to hear. I tend to have mundane stories or crazy stories and nothing in between. My funny AI story is about 6 months ago. I can't even remember what it was called, but it was a Manus equivalent. So for people listening don't know what Manus is like an agentic AI platform that can control your browser and do stuff for you. So you could tell it, go fill in this form on this website for me, get me 5 quotes for my house insurance, that type of sort of multi-step workflow. So I signed up for this new tool that promised quite a lot of capability, more than Manus. And one of its use cases was it will autonomously build you a newsletter Substack business. You just give it a topic and it's going to get you to 2,000 subscribers, because it's a goal-oriented system, and it's going to make a plan. It's going to figure out how to do it. So I was like, okay, well, we'll do it. And I went through some of the setup steps, and I gave it a niche topic in healthcare that I thought would be interesting. So it starts building, it's planning, it's doing stuff. And it's the typical building in public tool, right? It's breaking all the time, left, right, and center. It's trying to do 11 things at once. Some of them it's doing quite well, and other things it's doing badly. And then at one point it said to me, 5 emails sent. And I thought, what? Because one of the things with this tool is you give it its own name and you give it its own email address. So it's like really quite agentic in that sense. So I dug a bit more into the section that it was in its to-do that I'd completely missed, where it was pitching my newsletter that didn't exist because it couldn't get the Substack bit working, to real-life bloggers to see if they wanted to feature my newsletter. I was like, no, you should have shown me this before you started emailing real people. So obviously I shut that down pretty quickly. And ultimately, this sounds terrible, but those emails didn't come from me, so I wasn't implicated. They came from Caspian, or whatever I called my AI agent.
Yeah.
But the fact that it would just start building a list of like influencers in health blogging and start emailing them without my consent gave me a good reason to pause and cancel that account.
Now, the real question is, did you get any responses?
Not that I know of. Maybe Caspian's inbox is absolutely full of people desperate to feature my non-existing.
This is all part of the evil plan.
Well, that's always worried.
A lead gen service provider, by any chance?
Well, do you know what I was worried is, like, follow this to like the, up into the nth degree, and you get my bot pitching healthcare influencer blog bots, and it's just a bot fest. And are any of these people real? Probably could have got me to 2,000 bot subscribers. So yeah, it was kind of a fun use case. The whole thing took about an hour and a half and burnt $30 of credits, and taught me some important lessons.
Well, it's a race to the bottom. Sorry, terrible.
That's what I hear.
So the new cloud model that came out the other day, one of the things that it talked about is like how it needs to, one of the things they need to fix is that it would like inject like false like code to basically like verify its own work. So it would update its like verification criteria to then make it look like it's successful. And so I'm like in that future world, like if that model is ever released, in theory, it could go create a bunch of fake email accounts and then subscribe them to the newsletter. So then you end up with actually 2,000 subscribers of nothing because it then hit its goal.
Yeah, that's quite scary. What happens when you give a creative, non-human, intelligent entity a reward function to optimize for? And what crazy stuff does it try to, like, you might tell it, accidentally tell it, I want to be $1,000 richer, when really all you wanted was it to make $1,000. And then it misinterpreted it as being $1,000 richer than everyone else and found a way to hack everybody's bank account, take all of their money away. Some weird stuff is going to happen when we misstate what we really meant in terms of the outcome we wanted and see some absolutely bizarre reward hacking behavior.
What's interesting, actually, related to that is there have been all of these like usage, people hitting their usage limits like really quickly using Claude lately. And one of the engineers over there has done a couple like interviews with people to kind of figure out some of the problems. And what he found is that oftentimes if you give ambiguous verification criteria of when something's done, Claude will just like continue to work in loops because it's not sure. Like if you say something like verify when done, that is vague and doesn't mean anything. And so Claude will continue to do stuff and like rip tokens in order to try and like figure out what that means. And apparently that was like one of the big bugs that was causing people a ton of usage issues. So yeah, clear verification.
Do you think we need to explain tokens and usage quickly? Because if you're on a basic GPT account, you're just using it and you use it until you're allowed to not use it or whatever, right? So you may not even be familiar with the whole token digestion.
Yeah, we can talk about that, I guess. Well,
just quickly.
Yeah, on certain plans, you're limited certain amount of model tokens that you can use. So basically a token is like an effort level of a model. So how many input tokens and output tokens. So based on the prompt that you give it, it will take those as inputs. It will go and then do research, do a bunch of other stuff. And basically anything it consumes is like an input token. And then when it writes something back to you, it's an output token. And so pretty much any of these models have different usage criteria under your subscription. And that is what the usage and tokens are and how they add up. And so if you give it ambiguous prompts, especially in something like Claude Code, it will just go and keep reading files and keep writing code and keep doing things in a terrible cycle where then you end up probably spending way more than you should.
Easily done, sadly, as well.
Yeah, I mean, now that we're like completely nerding out into the weeds on this stuff, I think what might be helpful, Paul, is like give the listeners a little background on you. And you guys have the Marketing Intelligence podcast, and now your new role at Supreme, and maybe give a little background of why you're actually qualified to have us even talk about AI today.
Before you do that, Paul, let me just give a framing for the rest of the conversation for anyone listening and just think, wow, they went deep into a lot of shit I know nothing about. I'm going to check out right now. So the aim of this podcast is we're all going to chat about various AI stuffs, particularly in marketing and sales, but we're actually going to get to the point where we're going to tell you all of the really crazy, cool stuff we're doing that's probably at one far end, and probably looking at the other end where most people are behaving, which is GPT or Claude as a search engine. And then at some point, we're going to give out some great tips on what you should start with next. But I just wanted to frame that so you don't think you're going to be sitting here listening to about tokens and how tokens are created for an hour. So you're out. There's going to be some useful stuff you can invest in and go do in sales and marketing that you can really learn from today, hopefully. That's my sort of like pitch for the listeners of why they should stay. Now, don't ruin it, Paul. Tell them something fun.
Yeah, I've got to try and justify why we're the right people to talk about this, I guess. But for those that don't know me, I have a PhD in molecular biology. I work predominantly in life science marketing. That's how I know the gents here on the call. I moved out of science and into marketing after I completed my PhD and ended up co-founding my own marketing agency called Biostrata, which was acquired by Supreme Group in 2024. Now I hold a sort of dual role as VP of marketing, taking care of Supreme Group's own marketing across all of our agencies, but also I work within the AI enablement team, helping to train and infuse AI into the way that we work at Supreme Group. And I guess I would say this, but we have made incredible progress over the last 12 months in terms of enabling our teams to use AI. And I think one of the things that I was interested in having this conversation with you both is I know you have also made a lot of progress, and we're probably both working with clients and internal team members that come from this from a different perspective, right? Like, as an example, we have a lot of highly curious, highly intelligent ex-PhDs on our staff in a number of our agencies. And because they're a bit like ourselves, I would say, like interested to learn these things, maybe a tiny bit nerdy, they just start playing and they start building, and they don't really need that much guidance. Every now and again, they break something that doesn't need to break. And if someone has fixed that and figured out that problem in the past, then that's obviously a useful bit of information. Otherwise, it's a little bit like one of those toy cars where you pull it back and it's got the spring in it and you just let it go, right? You just go, here's the tools, have fun. Other people, quite understandably, might not come from a particular technical background. Maybe they don't have a lot of software use in their past. Like maybe they only really use email and Microsoft Word, and then moving to agentic AI platforms can be a bit of a leap. And I think in general, people can be a bit reticent to start because they're like, I don't know where to begin, or they're worried they're going to break it, or that they're going to upload some information that they shouldn't upload. And then obviously they're worried they're going to get in trouble. And so from that other end of the spectrum, figuring out how to help those people get started and give them confidence to start playing is key. And then something really magical happens. And I'd love to get your take on this, if this is something you've seen, which is once they get licensed to play, they start building awesome things, often from a completely different perspective than a very technical person would. And it was just that first barrier that they needed to get over. And once they sort of got playing with stuff, they start doing amazing things. And then the gap between the sort of curious nerds and everybody else can actually shrink quite quickly. I don't know, what's your experience been?
Yeah, I mean, I think across kind of some of the stuff that you say right there are, well, first off, I would say one funny comment I've heard, which is like, you have to be unemployed in order to keep up with what's going on with AI. I think is also pretty funny because, like, yes, stuff changes literally day to day. And so if you're truly trying to be on the cutting edge, it does take a lot of paying attention to what is happening. But then also you have to tinker, like you have to play, you have to try stuff. That's the best way to best way to learn anything. I think actually one thing that's really interesting with AI is that it can kind of create like a problem where you just sit and like think with AI and you just kind of like go back and forth and like you never actually do anything. And I think this is pretty common with stuff like if you're just sitting and using ChatGPT or you're just using Claude as like a chat, is that you just sit and think and you come up with ideas and you chat about it, but nothing actually gets executed. And I think that's another piece that's really important is if you want to figure out how you can best use AI, you have to like use it and you have to figure out how do you turn your ideas into execution. And I think where some of that is becoming really interesting now is with things like, Claude Cowork or Claude Code, which you don't have to be a coder to use Claude Code, by the way, is that you can now give it like an objective and it will go and do that objective. Now, obviously, you want to be careful with some of these third-party tools that create fake newsletters and try and, spam people about them. But in theory, you can think about what is your objective for what you're trying to accomplish. And then you can kind of like hand it over to AI and let it go do it and watch it and, make sure that, it's not going off the rails. But the way that we think about this stuff is especially now with the models, is it's less about like, how do you create an incredible prompt, where I think that was maybe a year ago, you had to be like a prompt engineer to get a good output. And today you can be, I don't want to say vague, but you can be objective oriented. It's like, what is the task or what is the thing that you're trying to get done? And everybody understands that, right? Like anybody that's doing any sort of work understands they have an objective that they have to hit. And so you could, like, if you think about AI from that perspective, is just go tell it what you want it, like what you want the outcome to be, and then, watch it do its magic. And so I think that can limit that barrier of like what was a couple of months ago, having to come up with incredible prompts and be a prompt engineer to like actually getting valuable output.
I probably have a different take on this because I would say I probably am that non-technical person when it comes to computers and
That's
AI.
for sure. 100%
Yeah.
can confirm that one.
But we're definitely in this room, but it's that analogy. If I walk into a different room, I'm probably the expert, right? But I think what I found is I'm that person that just tinkered. I generally don't need permission for things, and I'm generally a geek, so it suits me well because when I found it interesting, I started just playing with every tool I can find. I'll sign up for it, try it out, cancel it, all of that sort of stuff. But definitely don't know any coding language. Never learned anything. At one point when we started using Clay, Harrison introduced me to some bloke called Jason. Don't know. I had to use him for a bit as a coding language. But
He means
like,
Jason.
yeah.
We're going to mark you down for jokes like that.
All right.
But I'm basically that person, and now I would say I'm fairly proficient in AI tools, and I can probably teach myself a lot of stuff if I need to do it. And if I see something interesting, I'll go and learn how to do it. But I'll use the AI tools to teach me to learn how to do it, so I don't have to read 20 different publications on something. I think if you're inquisitive and you're willing to fail, like at business, like at anything you do, if you're inquisitive and willing to fail and solve those failures, then you'll get a lot out of AI. The other thing I'd say that I think is really game changer for me, and this has only happened in the last 6 weeks as we've implemented some even newer tools that are more action orientated, outcome orientated. I would have said that my skills are generally ideas and being excited about starting a project. These are some of my skills, right? I would say my lowest level of like skill that I really have to work on is completing a task, because once my excitement's gone, doing that like boring bit at the end of actually, I had the shiny idea, now I've got to do this and this. I don't now. I can have the idea, I can get creative, I can get really excited, build the thing to drive what I want to complete, and then have it complete, and then review the completed task. And I think that stage of implementation on those boring tasks make everything, for me anyway, much more achievable. So even for my personality type, I find that AI is making me more productive and efficient.
Can I ask, what are those tools that you've been using over the last 6 weeks that have triggered an acceleration?
It's actually probably tools people maybe have heard of, like Claude Code, but it's actually creating connections between that and other tools that allow them to call on each other to complete the task. Because Claude Code isn't going to complete it on its own. It's going to need access to your email. It's going to need access to your calendar, maybe access to call notes. It like needs access to our portal where we store information. And once it's got all of those things, it can be the person, the entity that pulls it together and drives the outcome. So you've had the idea, you've ideated, you've formulated what you want to do, you've generated some data, you've made some decisions, and then you go off and you just have gates for further decisions. So you're basically, you're managing the person.
Yeah, I think that's a really useful way of looking at things, because actually if before we get too deep into Claude co-work, if we imagine where people are at different like stages of exploring AI, right? There's a lot of people when I do any training or speak with any people, as you said at the beginning, Nick, most people have used ChatGPT, right? There's very few people now where you can say, right, who has never used an AI chatbot? Right, everybody has used one.
I think they have 1 billion monthly users or something absurd like that. I can't
Just
remember.
kind of
They
mad.
do. Maybe it's not quite, but it's something absurd.
So
Maybe our
Yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah, but verify its outputs. Hey, we'll come on to that later. There was, this hasn't been my experience massively, probably because of the businesses that I've worked with over the last couple of years. But if you look at sort of thought leaders in this space, like Ethan Mollick or Paul Reutzer, they'll talk about how many people's experience with ChatGPT is the free product. So the lowest capability model probably doesn't use any thinking, outputs very quickly, very unreliable in terms of accuracy. Which, if you're one of those people who's using ChatGPT, but you're still on a free account for whatever AI tool you want to use, that's your first step, isn't it? You've got to invest that $20 a month and get access to the latest models, because what you're telling yourself is these things aren't very good, but actually what you're using is the cheapest, crappiest version of everything. And that's why they're not very good, not because they're not capable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everyone says I need my coffee or I can't function, right? And I bet you spend more than $20 a week on your coffee to function. Pick a tool.
The irony is, once you get good at this, I'm looking forward to going deep with you guys on this later, but even from what we've just discussed, if you can't get $20 worth of work product value in like an hour after having a bit of a play and getting used to the tools, then you're not using them right. So $20 a month is like a pittance, honestly.
I think where it gets wild is when you want to do a bunch of crazy stuff and then you're on multiple max plans across different tools, and then you have to sign. You're like, this tool needs an API, so I got to go sign up for that one, get the API key connected into this other system. It could get pretty wild eventually, but I mean, again, like the cost of the amount of work value that you get is exponentially more than the cost of any of these things independently. I mean, even on a Claude Max plan today, I think that somebody did some analysis that basically says that like it's $5,000 a month worth of tokens that you basically get for 200. So you're like, the amount of value that you're getting is, what is that, 25 times X? 25 times? Like it's crazy what's available right now.
I want to just use what you just said there as an example of how, for people listening, of how easy it is. Because when you got 3 people who know about it now and use it all day talking about it, it can seem like it's very inaccessible. Just over a year ago, I asked Harrison what an API key was, right? I didn't know.
You still know.
Yeah, it's an API. Yeah, I need an API. Give me an API.
That's how we're
and then I wanted to build an app, and I was like, okay, so I kind of understand what it is. Still not really sure where I get one of these or how to use it. So I was in Replit at the time building a little app, and I said to Replit, so I need an API key for this apparently. Where do I get one and what do I do with it? And Replit walked me through step by step how I go to get it, where I look, here's a screenshot, this is what you do, this is what it is, this is where you input it, now give me the API key. And then it was connected, right? So, but that was me sort of a year ago, not knowing what that is. And now I'm thinking about using OpenClaw or Hermes to try and learn how to build an agent for my family so we can have a personal butler, right? You know, this is like where we're going to, and it is a year of learning, but it's easier to learn than ever.
Yeah, but even there, you're right. Once you're inside the system, you don't even know. Like Replit, OpenClaw, like a lot of these things will be, a foreign language to a lot of people. But like you said, once you start playing and the tools give you guidance on what to do, I think lots of people, if not everyone, is going to be able to learn quite quickly and able to like gain access to certain capabilities that they want. And they're also going to see where the models aren't good right now. Like they'll try and do something and it will still fail. There is a lot of that. But in my mind, it's still worth the experimentation time, because when you figure out particular use cases that nearly work, in 6 months, the next model is going to make them work. So you just need to put them on the shelf and then you can come back to them. But I think if you never used a paid account, now you move on to a paid account. Once you're on a paid account, in your opinion, guys, like what tool would you get a paid account in first? Would it be ChatGPT, Claude?
I'm Claude pilled. So I think the thing with Claude is that you get, with the subscription, you get access to the different tools, which I guess you do now a bit with GPT or with OpenAI. You'll get like Codex and some of the other things. But I think Claude is probably going to be more user-friendly with things like Cowork than, OpenAI. So yeah, I would probably go Claude, because I think what's interesting with Claude is then there's also like a step ladder within the same ecosystem. So you can start with chat, which is what you're used to already using ChatGPT. And then if you want to step up from that, you could use something like Cowork, where it can start like actually executing stuff on your behalf. And then when you get even more advanced, you have like the next step up to Claude Code, which is going to be where you can do even more advanced things within there. And then they've got some stuff because something got leaked, but they have some stuff coming on the horizon, which sounds like it's similar to something like OpenClaw, which is like an autonomous agent that will be able to just like, you could chat with it from your, iMessage or your WhatsApp, and have it do work in the background behind the scenes. And so I think what's interesting with Claude, at least right now, is you kind of have that step ladder within one platform. And so that's kind of my bias on that one.
I would say I agree with all of that. But the one thing I would say in knowing, working with multiple teams over time, that people have different levels of like risk aversion and how much time they're going to invest in something. I think Claude is the better platform for all the reasons Harrison gave at this point in time. But if you've only ever used ChatGPT and that feels too much of a leap, then just buy the paid version of ChatGPT. Do the easiest thing first. If you're going to invest a little bit of time to just start to learn to navigate chat in Claude and things, it's easy, you can. But if you're not going to, do the easy thing first and you'll soon be in the same rabbit hole as us and trying to get all of the tools.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm pretty Claude pilled at this point, and I think the secret weapon is Claude Cowork. Somewhere between chat and code, where you don't have to be a developer, but you can get stuff done. And I did a training session internally yesterday. It was one of our operations teams. And they asked me great questions that really encouraged me to think about how people who haven't lived and breathed this stuff for the last 3 years think. Because it became clear to me that the idea of asking for something in natural language and it would just work is not something people would expect. They expect to have to provide details that they don't know. And I'll give you an example. One of my use cases is every morning, Claude Cowork has a scheduled task that reads all my Slack messages from the day before and all my emails and gives me a sexy, gorgeous, animated HTML report that has my actions, my FYIs and other stuff, and super helpful. And I could see the team were already worrying about how can I get it to make a nice HTML report? I don't know any HTML. And I'm like, you don't need to. Just say, make me a sexy report. And I've just given you a clue, which is to ask it for HTML. You don't even need to know what that is. It's just going to
just say, make a report out of this and it'll give you the report. Yeah,
exactly.
It's going to teach you as well. It'll go, oh, don't know how to do this. Learning HTML skill. Like it literally will tell you in Claude it's doing things, right?
Right. And then there was something in the early versions of that system that I noticed quite quickly would be more usable for me, which is, it's great to read that report, but then I see a to-do, which is usually to maybe reply to someone in Slack. Now I have to go find that message in Slack. So I'm like, Claude, can we update our report scheduled process so that you find a way to make it easy for me to just click through to the relevant email or message? I didn't say how to do it, what it should look like, any of that. Just, this is how I'm going to use the report, figure out a way of making it more usable. So it came back and told me what it recommended. Sounded good. So let's do it. Now I have an easy clickable link in each of those things. But the critical piece there is, as you said right at the beginning, Harrison, imagining what you're trying to achieve, being as clear about what good looks like or done looks like as you can, but don't worry about the details, especially if they get a bit technical. Claude knows how to do all of those things. So I think that's the big leap then, if you do decide to go with Claude, which I do recommend like you guys do, and then you move quickly from chat into Cowork, is to stop saying, rewrite this email for me, and instead say, go read all my emails from yesterday and write draft replies for them all for me to check and send, right? It's more outcome focused. It's more task focused. It's not a specific piece of content that you want in a chat output.
I also, a couple of things you just said there led me to think about something I do, and it's intentional now, but like has helped me, is that I often will be like, oh, I'm just going to tell it to do something. And I tell it the outcome with minimal information, understanding that I'm now going to go through an iterative process. But I quite like seeing what Claude or GPT will come up with without too much framework, because I understand that, not being a coder, I understand that it doesn't process information and think in the same way a human does. So if you're going to get an outcome from an SOP, you go down the SOP, right? Claude may go off on a different process to derive to the same endpoint. And understanding its process to drive into that endpoint, it may gain something that I wouldn't have thought of. So often I go with minimum viable product of prompt, see what the output is, and then iterate it and tell it what I would like to change with more detail in the second and the third. And you'll be surprised at what the outcome can be sometimes with very little.
I think the biggest thing too, in regards to what you guys are both talking about, is that once you start to realize what's possible, your brain expands to allow you to come up with new ideas. Like your whole thing you just said, Paul's like, I just need to know what to do. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. Now I have to go do those things. And then now when I'm doing those things, could it also draft those things for me? And I just go and click send, or I can view in the report what it's planning to draft for me. So I don't even have to leave the report. Like, you can start to figure out what the things are that like your brain expands anytime. So here's a perfect example. Anytime I roll out anything new for our team internally, the first question is, oh, but can it do this now? Oh, but can it do this? Can it also do this? And it's like, this wasn't even physically possible 30 minutes ago. And you're already going down, 9 feature iterations of what's possible. But I guess that's the point. And that's kind of what unlocks when you start to think about how you could leverage this stuff. But the first step is to just do something. Like, one example that I think is an easy one for people, and Claude is actually really good at this now, is we had to do a training and we had different slides in like 7 different decks. And we had to like figure out how to compile them all. I gave it all 7 decks. I said, here's what the training is about. Fix the deck. Like, just give me a deck. So what I thought was going to happen was it was just going to take the slides, put them together into one deck. And I was like, that's what I was expecting. But the output was like completely redesigned slides that looked incredible. And I'm like, this is our new slide deck. This one redesigned. Like, I am no longer using these old ones anymore. It just like completely like went and did it. And it was just simply because it was an outcome driven sort of goal that I was looking for. And what I was expecting was not what it actually came up with, which was actually a great surprise.
Yeah, I want to double
Everybody's
click
got
on
to
that.
make decks, so you could always use that as a use case.
Well, I want to double click on that quickly, because I think that's another thing about moving to an agentic workflow with something like Claude Cowork. And when we say using agents, what we mean is you're not using chat anymore, you're using Claude Cowork. Now you're using agents, whether you realize it or not. And sometimes Claude will say to you, let me spin up an agent to do X, Y, Z part of this task. And that's how you know. And basically it's because it's beavering away doing stuff in the background. But what that opens up is use cases like Harrison said. It can create and edit and combine Word documents, PowerPoint files with reasonable fidelity. I've got a question for you two on that. But so one of my colleagues, Sheldon, he's the founder of Supreme Group, and he's our head of AI now. He doesn't open Word docs anymore. Claude is making all of his edits for him. It's like he's got a 24/7 assistant. He reads the doc. He's like, the introduction should have covered X, Y, Z. Let's get that in there. We need to get rid of section 2. It doesn't make any sense. Section 6 should probably be expanded. And section 7 has this in it. And because you can talk to Claude, it has a little microphone button, right? You don't have to type. He's just giving feedback like he's got a personal assistant from like the 50s, like a typist or something, right? Mm-hmm. And is making all the edits directly in the doc. So again, I think if you're using free ChatGPT, you probably haven't had that experience yet. And it is quite an interesting one. But one of the challenges I run into is, even though I give Claude Cowork our PowerPoint templates and Word templates, it messes them up a reasonable amount. So there's formatting fixes that I need to do on the final file. Do you guys get that, or have you found a way around that?
I think you definitely get some of that. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's infinitely faster than starting from scratch. And it's also like quite good at like revisualizing stuff for you as well. So if you're like, hey, I want a new visual, like it might come up with a better visual for a data set or some stats or a table of some variety that you would have maybe never thought of or thought to design. And I think that while it's probably not perfect, let's say take this template and do exactly what I want it to do, you could probably get something that is very good that would take you having to learn maybe those nuances within Google Slides or within Word or whatever that you don't have to learn anymore. It's like, it's just, again, if you're not a PowerPoint user or PowerPoint user, you don't need to be like, have it do it and then tell it to fix it. And then like, you don't have to be the expert, but you may have to go in and tweak a couple of things, but that's still faster than starting from zero.
Totally. I also, once I've done a lot of those things, especially when you're editing in a doc, in Claude to edit a doc, and you're like, section 2, correct this, section 4, do this. Sometimes it doesn't carry the link between paragraph 2 and paragraph 3. So one of the things I've started to do is like, when I've finished the task, cool, go back as an expert and review this and see for any inaccuracy or errors and make it go and review its own work. And it'll come back, you're right, I missed this, let me go correct that. right? And then after I've done that, I'll do the human review.
Now, the super advanced way to do that is to be in Claude Code and use a separate AI model that isn't biased with the same. So you would use, instead of Claude as a like Opus 4.6, you could flip that and then use like Google Gemini model to review the work, which is actually quite interesting. But that's the advanced version.
You could also get all of the models to argue with each other.
Yeah. Perplexity has that feature built in, where you can basically, give it a research project or a research query, and it'll use 5 different LLMs to do the work, tell you where they disagree, where they agree, and then kind of create a synthesis of all of them together, which is quite interesting.
Microsoft just built a version of this into Copilot, where one model checks the outputs of another model, and it seems to be emerging as quite a systematizable, powerful way of validating outputs and eliminating hallucinations. The old school way was running similar prompts through different models and then having them review each other's outputs and stuff like that. But how do you do that in Claude Code then?
Just different API keys. So you're in your whatever code base that you're working, code base folder structure that you're working in.
Yeah.
You just need different API keys for those models, and then you would just have it trigger those models specifically. So you'll get a Google Gemini Pro API key that you would use and put it into the same folder structure.
So what's the difference between Cowork and Code?
Fundamentally, they are very similar. Cowork is the I don't want to say watered down version. It's like the user-friendly version, right? So under the hood, I think they're pretty much the same thing. I think the difference is within Code, you have a lot more like control over things if you have that sort of technical knowledge and understanding. But I think what Anthropic's trying to do is make Cowork basically like a UI for Claude Code, like being able to do it there. And I mean, you have like the code tab that you could use within the desktop app itself, but I think Cowork is going to become the thing that, whatever 85% of the world would use, and then the heavy users will be on Claude Code or something.
Yeah, I started with Claude Code and then went to Claude Cowork. And actually, I was glad that I did, because I was pretty busy at the time and I didn't quite have the bandwidth, time and mental, to push forward with adopting some of the things that probably coders take for granted. Like, it's not always that fun to be reviewing markdown files in markdown format, right? Like, those that don't know, the file format of choice for AIs to read and use is called markdown. And it just uses a very simple coding system to show what are headers, what is a bullet list, what is bold. Very easy for a computer to read. Not super hard for a human to read either, but just looks kind of messy and gives you a headache after a while. So I just found it easier in Cowork. But I could imagine that once you get good at Cowork, going back to code is probably quite an easy step, because a lot of the use of skills and folder structures you're sort of already used to.
You do realize you could have had Claude turn those markdown files into HTML artifacts for you to review in a nicer way.
Well, that would have been good. But then I'd have seen the raw HTML in Cursor or whatever IDE I'm using. And I'm like, so yeah. So I think you're right, Harrison. I think 85% of the people are going to use Cowork. And I think because of that, we'll see more and more of the differences evaporate. Like the ability to pull in different models, that might evaporate. Like maybe as a wrapper, Anthropic realized that getting everyone addicted to Cowork, regardless of the underlying model, is worth it for their business model. We shall see. I don't know.
Well, this is the whole perplexity game. The whole game perplexity is playing. Listening to interview with their CEO, and basically one of the questions was like, Apple came to acquire you, gave you a good offer. Why'd you say no? And he's like, because I think we are uniquely positioned in like the future world where you have all of these individualized models like your ChatGPT or Codex, which is the coding version. It's like the Claude Code equivalent of ChatGPT. You've got Claude Code, you've got Gemini, whatever. You've got all these different types of models, and they all are actually doing better at different things, right? So they all stack rank differently based off of their unique capabilities. And so what Perplexity is banking on is the fact that they don't have a model themselves, but they are like you call it a wrapper, the wrapper around everything and all of these different models so that you can use the best one for like fit for purpose. And so they've rolled out a number of like pretty crazy things. Like there's this thing called Perplexity Computer where you can basically like clone your computer and be able to access like the files and everything on your computer remotely, be able to message it from like your phone, but it can connect to all of these different models to execute specific tasks. So like Gemini, really good at watching YouTube videos and figuring out what's going on in video, you could use it for that. If you want to do like front-end design, maybe Opus 4.6 is the best for that. But if you want to do back-end design, maybe Codex is the best for that. And so you end up like, they're kind of thinking about that orchestration layer across models. And so I think it's kind of interesting that you said that. I'm hard pressed to think Claude or Anthropic is going to do it, but yeah, because then they're basically admitting that their model's not the best.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it's going to play out. I think
they did start. They did give it to Microsoft though. So like Microsoft Cowork is Claude Cowork under the hood.
Yeah,
I think we keep talking about co-work, and I think that if you're going to invest in it, one of the things that people listen to this that don't do it should do is go into Claude Co-work instead of chat. And the very simple thing you can do is click the little plus button at the bottom where it says add connectors. And then you can start to do things like you was talking about, where you can get it to link with your Gmail and your calendar. And now you can start to give me a daily report on the meetings I've got today and give me some research on each company. And now you've got that. And you could have that set up in 5 minutes, right?
I think that's the secret weapon. Claude, in its current implementation, I don't know if we've mentioned this either, but you have to download the desktop app of Claude to get access to this stuff. You can't just use the browser. But I think the critical thing here is how much easier Claude is making it to give relevant context about you to Claude to do better work for you that doesn't always require you to know what the context is. You just need to know where it lives. Mm-hmm. So I shocked a couple of our team members yesterday with my ridiculous laziness by telling them that I don't even search Slack for messages or stuff now, because I find the search function really hard to use. And when I'm looking at all my DMs and channels and all this other stuff, I've got a chat with person A and person B, but I've also got a chat with person A, person B, and person D. And I've got a chat with B and C and D, and they all look the same in the window. And I'm like, I'm not going to go through 15 of those to try and figure which one had that link in it. So I just tell Claude, go find the message where we talked about something like this. I can't even remember where it is or who it's with, but you'll figure it out. And it goes and does it. So I think context is key to get great outputs. And giving context is easier because you can give those connectors, Nick, and just let it figure it out itself.
I think the hardest thing that most people are going to probably run into is that their company won't let them do this. And I think that might be the biggest blocker that people run into. And so, I mean, I don't necessarily have a great answer for that other than to tell companies to get it together. And otherwise they're going to be falling behind. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that that if that's the case for you, my recommendation would just start using it for your personal life. Still get the paid plan, start doing it, and use it in some of your personal circumstances as well. Because I think if you don't, then when you go to a company where you are allowed to use it, you're way behind the curve. So I would say you need to your company won't allow you to use it is probably not a good enough reason not to use it, because you can save time in your personal life, and maybe now you've got time more to put into your business, your company, your job, whatever, because you're saving time in your personal life as well. But if you don't want to be left behind, because I think this is the education piece that is like now that allows us to understand, as every time a new model comes out, it's a small incremental learning of what I have to do. And I think for the next couple of years, probably that's still going to be important until it's completely user-friendly.
The future job for everyone in the knowledge space and probably beyond is managing a team of agents like you would manage a team of people. You must develop this skill, and you must do it now, because it is going to be the difference between who gets hired over the next 2 or 3 years and who doesn't. Yep. And if you cannot practice that skill at work, then you must practice it at home, because in my opinion, your career depends on it. And so get yourself a personal account and find cool things that you can do with your own personal email and your own personal calendar. And, start a side hustle. Start a newsletter that accidentally emails a bunch of influencers that it shouldn't have, or something that gets you using these tools.
Yeah, I can give you an example just to like give people some ideas of like so how I use it personally at home as well. And I don't just mean like for being a butler or whatever. My oldest daughter is just about to go through SACS exams. So anyone listening in the US, this is an exam you take at 11 years old, and it determines where you go in classes in the next school. So it's like almost like an entry exam. And it's really quite intense. And there's all of these past papers, and they're still asked to go through and just write down on past papers like, well, this seems archaic. So I got Claude to go and find the past papers for the last 10 years, the rules for marking and everything they need to do. And then went to Replit and said, build me an app where you create your own character based on points, and you log in and you go through it. And I want it to learn about AI tutoring and how the best methodologies to do to learn. And now she's got her own little app that she's practicing for SATs for, right? It took me maybe 5 hours actually, because I was quite invested in it and tweaking it. But it's something that's really useful for my family, and I learned a load of skills. So it doesn't even have to be, connect your calendar to Claude. It could be something completely different.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about Replit a bit on the podcast. Can you tell people a bit about what that is and what it does? Because I think it is I think once you get to grips with Claude Cowork and you maybe start producing some HTML reports and stuff, you're going to want those HTML things to be able to do cool things that they can't because they're static. And then you're going to want to build a web app. So can you tell the folks about how you do that in Replit?
You just tell it what to do and it does it. It's that simple, right? But it is an iteration process, I guess, as well. So you can create a prompt and you talk in normal language. The way I do it actually is I use Claude to help me create the prompt. I brain dump to Claude what I want to create, what the outcomes are, what I think the dependencies or inputs are, ask it for any gaps I'm not seeing, I get an output, and I'm like, cool, give me a markdown file that I can give to Replit to build me this app. And then it will do that. And then I go off and I put it into Replit, which is a tool that essentially builds you a web app that you can go into and use like any other kind of app you use on your phone or your desktop. And it has a little panel on the left-hand side where when you don't like something, say the color's slightly wrong, you go, well, here's the hex code for this color. I don't like that color, change it to this. And it does it. It's very simple discussion language, no coding at all. So just no code app building. I've probably become too invested in it and love it so much because I was at the train the other day and I was like, Harrison, I've got this cool idea. I built this thing and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, why don't you just use the one we've got that's in this other software that we've already got? I'm like, yeah, but I built it. And he's like, yeah, but we don't need it.
It was receipt tracking and like for VAT. And I'm like, this exists. What are you doing?
This is in Zero. Yeah, the colors weren't right. I wanted my own app. Yeah, but I did that in 20 minutes on the train and it was functional. So I didn't waste too much time. But yeah, I probably took too much of the pill.
I think you make a really good point there. Supreme Group has something like getting on towards 400, 500 employees. One of the things that's been on my mind over the last 24 hours is finding a way to help everybody build in public. Like we are accelerating. And I do wonder how many of us are reproducing agents, skills, workflows, even web apps that are 90% the same as someone else is building in another part of the business. And I think that is going to be a critical waste of energy and time across even from what you just said, right? Even businesses of 5-10 people, you're going to get that type of disconnect. So what can we do about that?
Is it possible to make like you can create like a GitHub repo, which would have basically, so we've done this internally for a lot of our stuff where they have a bunch of different skill files, different, commands, like kind of all of that, like the knowledge, it's all sort of centralized within that GitHub repo. In theory, you could probably create that repo for the whole team to have access to, and they're all collaborators. And then you just would somehow prevent them from being able to push domain, but they would just create pull requests like, oh, I got this idea for a skill. I'll go submit this as a pull request. Then you got a review team that would then look for any like duplications or stuff like that. And then be able to like probably ingest all of that into that repo that everybody then shares. But then the other interesting thing is then you could have like a show and tell or something that you do on a regular basis, which is like, hey, I put together this skill file. Here's how it works. And like, here's how you can leverage it. All you got to do in in Cowork is, run /command and it's going to like, execute that particular skill for you. So I think there's like two components, which is one, like the organization of the knowledge and how that gets done. And I'm like, well, even with that, there's like, you could probably build like a memory system and like a database, which has like previous assets and stuff. Cause you wouldn't want to store that probably in the repo itself. So you'd have like the repo connected to that database, which has all the assets. So you figure out how you want to build the database schema on. And then you would have like the show and tell component, which is who's doing the cool stuff, showing it off. And then that gets people FOMO for like what's possible. And that was really nerdy, but like, that was more to help you, Paul, than probably other people.
For anyone listening, basically the GitHub repo and skills is, imagine you've got a big filing cabinet in your office and it's full of the SOPs. And every time you need to know how to work, you got to go grab which SOPs you need. They're the skills and the repo's holding everything and the rules that it functions by.
Yeah. I think that's a really good, some great ideas in there, Harrison. I think your point is really important, Nick, because we have a GitHub account that does what you said, Harrison. But do you know what? For most people, and I include myself in this, looking at GitHub is like looking at Markdown. It's like looking at HTML. Yeah. When you first start getting to grips with GitHub, you're like, oh no, this is giving me a nosebleed. We also have a bit of a secret weapon in that we have Supreme Intelligence, which is like our underlying AI-driven operating system, which is extremely flexible. So we were having this discussion internally a couple of weeks ago, and within about 24 hours, our team had built a fully working Reddit clone within Supreme Intelligence so that we basically have a community where you can submit your skills and your questions or your tips, and then they get upvoted like they do on Reddit, so that ideally all the things people think is the coolest, like is raising to the top. But I think the thing that's on my mind is, and there's been a number of times in this discussion where you've spoken about things in a way that I also think about them, which is, oh, I just thought of this thing. It would be cool. I should do it. I should do it now. 5 hours later, because it should take 2 hours, but maybe you want to tweak it, or there's that last little bit that's broken and you're not going to stop until it's fixed. 5 hours later, you got this thing. So you went from, I had an idea, to building the idea in an hour, and then you spent 4 hours trying to fix it. Where was the bit where you would then stop and go, okay, just before I go building these things, because building is fun, how do I figure out if someone else has already had this idea and try and make sure that I don't accidentally replicate it? Because I think because it's so addictive, that's what happens, is when you first really get the bug, you have ideas, you build yourself a receipt system that arguably maybe you don't need, right? But because it's fun and it's cool and you learn a lot while you're doing it, and sometimes it never even occurs to you that someone else is already building this thing. But the biggest thing I'm working on at the moment is like the one ring to rule them all of content strategy and execution. And it has about 11 different agents in it, from a world-class headline creator to a structural editor to a fact checker and all this stuff. But it breaks a lot. So I'm doing a lot of troubleshooting. And then this morning I woke up and I went, we've got a content team. Do I not think that maybe they're thinking this would be a pretty cool thing to have as well? And how much of this have they potentially already built? And have I just spent 8 hours building this thing when I didn't need to? So I guess that came from a very personal experience. But yeah, do you guys find that you have an idea and then you race off and build it, or do you have a quick chat first to make sure that no one else has built it, or what?
Well, it's where I think yes is the answer. We race off and build stuff quite often. There's people, sometimes they have a chat, sometimes we race off and build it. It depends. I think the whole repo and having Claude connected is a good thing, because if you go to start building something it already knows exists, it can tell you, right? So that is good. The one thing I take from all of it, though, is slightly on a tangent to that, is that I think the important piece about it is empowering people to try and build those skills, try and build those things so that they know they're allowed to and they should do it. And in our company, that's easy. On the Monday morning call, there's 5 of us. I'm like, you can do this. Just go do it. We want to see more of it, right? In your company, there's a few more people than that, so probably more of an issue. But one thing, and once again, probably not for the listeners, more for you, Paul. One thing I saw another client do is they had a competition to build something for the company. And it actually ended up becoming their new product, their new AI product for that and it was a life science CRM company. And they've now launched an AI product that basically somebody went away during a competition and built for the company. And I think something like that could show people that you're actively trying to empower them to do stuff. And then if they go and do it and they do it in the right infrastructure, you would know it exists. But if they're doing it on their own outside of that infrastructure, that's where you're sort of really getting a challenge. And my second point is, I think just because we have Claude, we have to remember to include experts. We have experts in our company. And I said, what you've just said is there, you've gone off to build this thing and you've got a team of experts. Even if they've not built it, they've probably got a side angle that you and Claude may not have thought of.
Well, seems like a decent way to wrap this up. I know we're literally double the normal time here, but this was definitely fun. I guess Paul, if there's any last parting words that you'd want to leave people with, is maybe like a quick action. I know we've talked about a few, but any last words before we wrap up?
I think I would just say this is mission critical to your future career. Go and get yourself a paid Claude account, download the app and start playing with co-work. I think that's quite a simple sort of set of things to just start having a go at. And be curious and try and have a mindset of, how could AI help me with this? And imagine, people have been talking about this from the beginning, but I think it's probably the most true ever now, which is you truly do now have an alien intern. Very preppy, never going to get tired, intelligent in ways that you can't imagine and dumb in ways that you can't imagine, but actually capable of taking actions on your behalf. So anything that you could imagine that you might be able to brief to an intern, consider trying to get AI to do it. But remember, it's an alien. So sometimes it will do ridiculous things that you could never possibly imagine that no human would ever do. And so you just have to have that patience that comes with providing feedback so that the tool learns over time as to what outputs you're really looking for. And then you'll build this like symbiotic relationship where it'll understand you better because Claude has a form of memory. It can remember certain things about you from the chats that you have with it. But you'll also learn what Claude is good at and not good at, so that as you have future ideas and you're trying to get work done, you'll be pushing it into tasks that you can be pretty sure you're going to get the output you want in a usable time frame.
That's a great way to leave this episode.
Cheers, gents. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully I'll see you again in real life soon.
Yeah, I'll see you soon. Have a good one, Paul.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye.